Welcome back to the show. We're about to learn the secret sauce. Excellent. So, Kimberly, thanks for making the drive over.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and now that we're recording, I just want to say I love the pen. We'll probably maybe we get a close-up later.
Get a close-up, yeah.
And yeah, it's Black History Month.
It is. And I like I'm in Oakland, I live in Oakland, and you have to kind of represent what that represents, and Black Panther Party and Oakland, California, and all that history. So I thought I'd wear this.
How long have you
today.
been in Oakland?
Only about 2 years in terms of living, like right in the middle of the pandemic. Me and my daughter moved over from San Francisco in the city, but we've been working and going to school in Oakland for almost 10, 12, 15 years now, but never made the move until the pandemic.
Okay, well, welcome. It's lovely here. I've been here. I've been here for actually 9 years.
Okay.
And, my kids go to school here. I don't think I'm ever going to leave.
You're never going to leave.
Yeah, I mean, until like this thing exits and I got a nice little 9-figure deal or whatever.
I love it.
Maybe I'll get a house in Hawaii or something.
Oh, that sounds good. I might join you down there.
All right. Well, we'll stay in touch.
All right.
But I reached out to you because I've known of you for a while. I mentioned I saw you at GitHub Universe talk about Black Girls Code and founder of Black Girls Code.
Yes.
An amazing initiative, and you've impacted tons of lives. But did you want to just give us like a quick spiel of what that was?
Yeah. So, my daughter and I moved to the Bay Area back in 2006, and I was working in the biotech industry at that time. And she was a kid that I would say was interested in technology from the standpoint of being a gamer. And she still is.
Like the Roblox,
I guess that's unfortunately.
The Minecraft?
No, that wasn't even there then. This was like Dungeons and Dragons and World of Warcraft. So this kid was playing like World of Warcraft and like Nintendo games, but like anything that was really gaming related, she was into that type of stuff, but not like necessarily coding. But she was also sort of proximate to technology, if you will, because I worked in biotech and I would take her with me to work on, bring it out of the work day or whatever. I just would take her to work. And so she was around science and STEM, but she didn't really, I think, connect what I was doing on a day-to-day basis with the stuff that she liked until maybe around middle school. I was able to put her in the summer camp down in Stanford, and it sort of changed her whole, I would say, it definitely changed her whole trajectory in life because she is now working in the industry. But it changed her perception of what she could do via technology and from computer science perspective. And she could go from actually being, a player of these games to creating them. Yeah. And so her whole world view of what she wanted to do from a goal perspective changed. And it was that really drove me to leave corporate America and get into nonprofit. Like I was certainly not intending to go into nonprofit before. Had no interest in that. But it was this fear I had, if you will, that if my daughter did not have a community to learn these skills with, she may not stick with it. You know, she may lose interest or she may be discouraged. And so I just sort of started this little after school thing on the weekends. And it grew from there to this really small group that was really like 6 girls that was in her little golfing group. They started code on Saturdays, and that became this organization that's impacted thousands of girls all over the U.S. and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing because like I remember growing up, I was knowledgeable in computers. Like we had a computer in our apartment complex. So like in the main building, we go to the leasing office, there's a computer lab, or not even a computer lab, one computer. Yeah. And some of the older kids in the neighborhood would teach us like, hey, this is how you run these games. And then that's how I have a twin brother. Yeah. We'd learn how to like run DOS and everything like that because I'm a bit older than your daughter. But yeah, so that's how I got like really experienced in computers, but I didn't ever think, oh yeah, I'm going to go to college for this, or I'm going to like do more with this or create my own programs and games. And I wish I had something that pushed me to that. And like I was in the gifted program because like we grew up in the white neighborhood. It's outside of Tampa in the suburbs. So like they had the gifted program. That's a whole nother conversation. The gifted program and what that is. I was
in the gifted program too. So like we can really have a conversation about being tracked as a kid.
So, but what's crazy about this is my twin brother the reason we went in the gifted program
Yeah.
is because we had like some tragedy to happen in our house when we were really young. And like my brother had like a lot of emotional things that he was going through. And they ended up testing him because he thought he had a learning disability or something. And when they tested him, they're like, wow, you actually tested off the chart.
Yeah.
You should be in the gifted program instead. Like maybe you're just not doing enough.
Yeah.
And then they tested me and they're like, oh, wow, he's even higher.
Yeah.
Both of you twins in the gifted program. And so I got exposure to computers even more. Lego Mindstorms and stuff like that was like just starting. And I appreciated all that. But then when I got to high school, it was like, oh, I just want to play sports and do whatever. And not even care about school as much as I could have. And then I ended up going to college with a finance degree that didn't do me anything. But I appreciate things like Black Girls Code because my son, who's now 9 years old, like he's doing computer courses after school downtown in Oakland.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's fantastic because he wasn't interested, but he is a Roblox kid. And he is very interested in doing more with Roblox. I'm like, okay, do you want to do a class?
Yeah. So the funny thing about it, though, like you say, like you're older than my daughter, but you probably might not be that much older, but she's 23.
Okay.
But it's interesting, though, that even being in that generation, so Gen Z, and living in San Francisco back in 2010 and 2011, there was not a lot. So like that was still sort of the beginning of this movement with kids learning to code. It was at I would say the beginning of that momentum starting to build. And by the time she was ready to go to high school, and we were looking at high schools and going through this rigorous process, so get ready for that because it is a process.
Yes.
And we were looking at high schools, and most of the high schools in San Francisco and even in Oakland did not have any rigorous curriculum around computer science. Like they was like, oh, well, we have a design class here. And I was like, yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, do you teach Python? Are you teaching anything around Java? Like, do you have a APCS class? They didn't have that. And so it took me a minute to find a school that had even a little bit of a formalized education at that time. Now, this is back in 2013, 14 or so.
Okay.
And then the momentum really started to grow with organizations like Black Girls Code, Code.org, Girls Who Code, etc., that really started to push the needle a bit on after school programs like the ones your son is in, but also in educational settings in school. Because I think what we realized at Black Girls Code is that we were only an extension of what should be happening in the school systems. We cannot replace that, right? And we just don't have enough time or resources. But schools needed to do their part because that's where gifted students like you would first be exposed, if you will, to the skill set. Because otherwise they wouldn't know to come find us unless a parent like you or a parent like me was like, hey, you need to be in this class. And so I think that's the equalizing piece of it, is that the more we can make sure that it becomes a part of curriculum, just like math, science, and arithmetic and all of that, it won't get to the folks that need it the most that are on the margins.
Yeah, 100%. And that, so you've got this after school program, coding with like the small cohort of and you sort of skated by the sort of golf kids. Like that's a whole other thing.
First tee golf though, but the same thing, even with that, it was like the First Tee program that teaches kids that are coming from these marginalized communities about golf and skill sets beyond that. It actually teaches real life skill sets. But like we even just sort of fell into that because I was a golfer and I would take my daughter to the golf course. Okay. And these other Black moms from First Tee saw us and was like, that's a Black lady and her daughter. Let's go talk to them.
But that's how the community is formed. And like you don't see yourself, you don't know there's an opportunity for you.
Absolutely.
And so like my son actually is also doing this, like he did it in the summer, which is this Ninja Warrior class. And they just teach him how to jump on stuff and do parkour, which is, and he also did like the gymnastics at UC Berkeley. And like, I get it. Cause like now I have money. Yeah. Cause I didn't have money until I got my tech job. Yeah. But now I can go put him in places. Cause I think a lot of people don't realize, you think of like, oh, if you're in the neighborhood, you got to go sports or you're going to go into music. Right. And there's a shift that happened in sports pretty quickly in the last like 10 to 15 years, where all the people who are all the NBA stars all went through AAU, all went to camps, all had trainers. And like when you look at Steph Curry, like their dad was a player. Yeah. When you look at what's the other guy? Klay Thompson. Mm-hmm. His parents were like, his dad was a coach in college. James Harden went to AIU. Like all the big names outside of LeBron, he's like the one that like what came from the neighborhood. But everyone had a path to get here. Yep. And that's been the transition. That's also the same transition in tech as well, where you now have the people who built the internet, now their kids are going to build the next thing on the internet.
Absolutely. And I think when you asked about my origin story, like that is a key piece of it. So like, you know, what I said, we were living in San Francisco at the time. I was working in biotech. So even though I was a Black woman in a male-dominated industry, I still had privilege, right? Because I had this biotech job. I had a certain level of income. So I could afford to go take my daughter to this very expensive class down in Stanford. And, you know, she's the only Black kid in the classroom and just a few girls. And that just didn't feel right because, like, I didn't grow up in, like, probably like you, I did not grow up in that environment. So had it been me, I would have never had that opportunity because my parents couldn't. My mother was a single parent. She wouldn't have been able to afford that. And so it set with me. And I even was like, you know, like, that's okay. I'm just going to take 5 girls from the golf course and put them in the class next summer. That's literally what I was thinking initially. And my friends were like, no, you should create something like this yourself. And that kind of started me on my pathway. But I still, you know, think about as opportunities change, how do certain kids in certain communities get left out? Because talent is everywhere, but it's just that access and opportunity, which doesn't reach everybody in an equitable fashion.
Yeah, and that's just the thing I'm going through right now, which is I'm currently raising around for extending what open source is. Yeah. And I got this analogy from a founder who went through YC, and he said that basically when you go pitch VCs, they always are looking for the reason why this is not going to work. And they're looking for that risk of like, that's too risky, not doing it. So like, it's almost, the analogy is like you hold a balled up piece of paper, which is like your company or your career, over a trash can, and they're just looking for a reason to drop it.
Yeah. And that sounds about right.
Yeah. And that's it's a lot of times because like I'll mention a bit of my origin story as well, because I got a finance degree but went into sales because I couldn't get a finance job. I graduated in 2008 during the last recession. And I remember having my finance degree, trying to get a finance job at like one of the biggest companies in my small town. And I went to the interview process, and it was just kind of like they were drilling me, asking me I remember getting the question, like, why are manhole covers round? Which is like the age-old question for like, it came from Microsoft back in the day. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, this is like, we're in Clearwater, Florida. Like, why are you asking me this question? And but he's just asking me like all these sort of brain tweezers. I'm not even a coding program. It's just like, what's your experience? Like, have you used Access? Yes, I know Access. Have you done this? Have you done that? Like, how would you do it? Yeah, okay. I heard the answers. And I didn't get the job. And then after that experience, it was a temp, and then it was an internal sort of like go from temp to full time with my degree, mind you. He emailed me and said, hey, you didn't get the role. Like, sorry, it didn't work out. And then he could have stopped there, but then he said, maybe think about applying the jobs you have the skill set for. Oh. And that was the thing that was like a gut punch. And I was like, that's interesting. I don't know why you went that far. I could have been like, because my standard response is like, oh, no worries. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah. Best of luck with growing the team. Yeah. And like every job I didn't get, because I applied to a lot of jobs out of college, and I was just like, oh, that's interesting. So it became my fuel of like, okay, I guess this guy doesn't think I could do it. So ended up, I taught myself how to, I knew VB script because of high school. I took one course it was a random course. I don't know why it was in my curriculum for school. And I would automate in my temp job all these large Cisco deals and use VB script to take it from a PDF to to Access. And I automated what took like 90 minutes to like 30 seconds.
I love it.
And that's when Netflix was on the phone. Yeah. It came out on the iPhone. Yeah. So I would just watch Netflix all day until my boss was like, hey, why are you always watching your phone? I was like, oh, I wrote a script to like do my job. And like, what? So I taught the entire team that. Yeah. And then the entire organization knew were using my scripts that I wrote. And then I ended up getting promoted, and then eventually got a sales role, and I got promoted 3 times because I would just automate myself. Like, LinkedIn came out, and I had no network with finance degree, so I used LinkedIn as like my network, my in, but no one else in the company knew what LinkedIn was.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, yeah, I just learned about LinkedIn. That's how I'm doing all these deals.
I love it.
So there's a trend happening right now where more and more startups are starting with open source first. If you check out any of the batches of YC, you'll see more and more open source companies now submitting applications to YC and getting in. Now, this is a good trend because the scale and velocity of what you can do and grow through open source is off the charts. Now, at OpenSauce, we are invigorated by providing actionable insights. Insights.opensauce.pizza. It's a platform to get intelligence on your open source projects. So if you're a company and you're up and coming through either YC or you're a Series A company who's looking to get their next round of funding and grow community, we have the platform for you. If you're interested in growing your project and growing your open source community, definitely check it out and let us know what you think.
I think that those shows how innovative, and talented, folks get overlooked all the time because of this thing called pattern matching that we talk about all the time. So they're looking for reasons for it to fail. But I think when it's folks that live on the margins, they also have blinders where there's bias, whether implicit or not intentional bias, where they can't see that you could do this role, or they can't get the motivation to bet on your potential, right? And because I think in VC and investors, they're always saying like, well, yeah, we want to see the solution, but they're really betting on the founder.
Yeah.
It's really not that thing. So I get it. They're trying to see if your project or your product is going to fail, but 9 times out of 10 in the beginning, they're betting on the founder because you're going to fail as a founder. That's how you learn. Yeah. That's how you get to a unicorn. Airbnb didn't start out Airbnb. Yeah. Facebook didn't start out Facebook. Come on now. We know what it started out. Yeah. So I think for me, that's been sort of the frustration that I have continued to have with the tech industry, is that even when we prove that we do have these skill sets, there are these biases that don't let us get to the next step. There's barriers. And I think that for me is the next thing we have to solve for. Yeah,
which I want to skate right to what you're doing today. Because definitely Black Girls Code, it's still in existence. A lot of girls and now women have gone through the program, including your daughter, which you said that she's in the industry. What is she doing today?
So my daughter graduated last year, hallelujah, and she is now working at Microsoft. So she's a product manager at Microsoft. She stayed with it, even through the ups and downs. She came out and now is really starting to build her pathway in the industry, but also she's a Web3 artist and an engineer in Web3 as well. So she's been able to find, a path to do her passions and also really crack this code of getting in.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good on to her.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to me. I did.
Yeah. You did it. Yeah. You drove her all the way down to Stanford to get her started.
I did. I want to take a little bit of credit, but I think the rest was all her.
Yeah. So tell me about the Black Innovation Lab, which you're working on today.
So as we were talking earlier, when I was really looking at moving away from what I had been doing and spending my time and focus on for the last 10 years, I was really sitting with, okay, what is next for me and what do I want to do and where do I find that I have the most interest and passion and I think motivation, even, if you will. And I found that what I really love to do is talk to founders. So I was talking to you about your company, when we first came in, but I love that because I just love talking to other builders and sharing experiences, giving advice, but I wanted to do more than just be a mentor and give advice. I wanted to really help accelerate these companies. I really wanted to be able to write a check to these companies. And so I came up with this idea of creating this network of innovation labs, particularly in the southern states, because that's where a lot of Black and brown people live, not on the coast necessarily, they're in the South. And so I found an opportunity to go back home and build this very first Black Innovation Lab in my hometown, which is Memphis, Tennessee, and really, I think, create the safe space, if you will, for founders that have an idea or maybe they have a little bit of traction and they need that first bit of seed funding to get support to get to the next level. And so my big vision, I think, would be for us to be able to support 1,000 Black innovators in starting their companies, starting with the Black Innovation Lab in Memphis, but then spreading in other places throughout the South.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I appreciate you going back home to do this as well, because there's so many people, because I'm from Florida, grew up outside of Tampa, but there's so many people when I go back home, they're like, it's almost as time had stood still for them. Yeah. And when I go back and I'm like, oh yeah, I started a company, and their brain melts. Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is interesting. Like, I have never been one to say, oh, I want to go back home. Okay. Like Oakland, California, Bay Area is my home. But home always calls me back for some reason. So like when I really started to incubate this idea of creating these labs, initially I was like, I'm absolutely building the first one in Oakland. Like, that's a no-brainer. I'm building in Oakland. And this opportunity just sort of like came across my computer screen and on Twitter one day. And I was like, wait, what? There's this building that used to be an HBCU and they're going to tear it down, but someone's trying to revive it. I was like, I need to be there. And I literally tracked, just like you did on LinkedIn. Shout out to LinkedIn. Right. I went to LinkedIn and I tracked down the developer of this project, which is a sister who's an urban developer that was living in Puerto Rico. And I used my network to get to her. And I was like, hey, I got an idea that I'm incubating and I would love to put it there. And that's how the project started to grow. And it was interesting. She's also from Memphis, but she was living in Puerto Rico and helping there with the hurricane. And she got pulled back as well. So now that we laugh and joke about how the city home always pulls us back, and how many of us that are working on this project have learned these skill sets elsewhere, but now we're coming back home, to build and give back all that we learned to the city that, where we were born. Yeah,
that's amazing. I didn't ask did you go to HBCU?
I didn't.
You didn't? Okay.
I did not. I went to a PWI. Okay. So I didn't even go to HBCU, but I wish I had one on the Howard. I was like, I wish.
Same, yeah. I didn't even apply, but I know a lot of friends that went to Florida A&M.
Yeah, FAMU.
And that was the school that everyone in my school was going to, and I was like, I'm just gonna stay home. Yeah. And I stayed home and went to Tampa and then commuted back and forth. Yeah. But in hindsight, I want to push my kids to that. Yeah.
That was always one of my great regrets. I was like, I should have went to Howard, and I would have probably transferred to Howard, but long story. I didn't. But now I think of, really in my work, how I can help and create a pipeline from HBCU students that are coming and participating in a Black Innovation Lab. That'll probably be one of our biggest sources of deals, I think, is really linking with these HBCUs and these places that we are located.
Yeah, and that's what I want to do. I told you about Floss and Code. Yeah. And we definitely want to revive that once we get a little more traction for what we're doing with the actual company itself. Yeah. But for folks who don't know, Floss and Code was Atlanta HBCUs. We partnered with OHub and got CS students in the summer during summer to come and do open source with us. Yeah, I love that. One of the ladies who went through that, she actually got a job. She got an internship at Apple. Nice. And she wrote a whole LinkedIn post about her experience, because one of the things we did is like do an open source contribution, and then take your contribution and write a LinkedIn post about what you did on GitHub. Yeah. Because not a lot of people realize, like, when you do stuff in the open, like, that's your resume. Like, absolutely, people will find that. But sometimes, like on GitHub, it's hard to find the stuff that person's done if they're not somebody who's already up here. So she did that. She got an internship at Apple, and I think she actually works at Microsoft as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So I think that there's such a wasted pool of talent that's being overlooked for many different reasons. And so part of what I really want to do with Black Innovation Lab is make sure that talent gets seen and make sure they get funded. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like you've been doing this sort of community nonprofit stuff going on. And there's definitely like the women now who have been impacted, including your daughter. Yeah. They're now at Microsoft or at these other jobs, and they have that exposure. And it's the same thing when I went through, I did an online program called Block, and that's how I learned how to code. Yeah. So I built, actually, I don't think I even talked about this to you or on the podcast yet, but I was in a sales job. My son was born 11 weeks early, and which meant we had to be in the hospital every day, had to go home. So every other day we stayed the night there, and every other day we went home. But it was 25 miles. Oh. Because it was a neo intensive NICU. Yeah. Because he was 1 pound, 14 ounces. And so I had an idea for an app, which was called Choich. We put the Y in church. And it was basically Yelp for churches. And I was like, sorry, I did a whole LinkedIn post on it this morning. So it's like top of mind. Yeah. But I ended up building that. and just like had an idea. I was like, I'm going to Google how to do this, because going back to my original, what I was saying, my origin story, it's like I was like computer adjacent. I can do a JavaScript, or I can do a quick little action script to do some Flash stuff. And I like figure it out. Me and my twin brother, we both were like this computer literate, but just never knew you could do it, because everyone said, like when I was trying to do iOS programming, the first thing they do when you get the Objective-C Big Nerd Ranch book, you read, like I read the preface, because I'm like, I'm going to read everything because I'm going to learn how to do this. And the preface is like, before you do this book, go buy the C book and go learn that. And I'm like, okay. So I'm gonna get the C book, and before you read this book, you got to go get assembly script. book. And I think that's an awful way to start the Big Nerd Ranch
if you
series.
got to start with assembly.
So I'm like, what? Why? So I give up. I failed, walked away from that. And so then when I had this idea for an app, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, because like I didn't do it the last time. I'd always been like adjacent to this, and I'm seeing all these other people start their startups and all these companies like Facebook, and I read the Google book, Ended a Plex, about their story, and I was like, I could do this. Like, I've got the tenacity, I've got the grit, I could do it. And I had to like psych myself up to do it, and I did. It took me 17 weeks from idea to shipping it. And then did that, and then I started going to meetups and got a job. And but I guess I bring that up because like the Black Innovation Lab, the best thing about this is like it might start with one city, it might start with a handful of people pitching their companies, but what happens like 5 years, 10 years, and then the companies that for the people that they hire in their city, then those companies that come out of those companies, and now everyone's like, oh, turns out we can do this. Because this person did it or that person did it.
It's interesting because, you know, when I was kind of really sitting with what I wanted to do next, I wanted something that would leave a lasting legacy. And I certainly think Black Girls Code will do that, but I wanted to go deeper. Like I really wanted to like make a generational shift. And so I was like, I have to do something that gets us closer to this notion of what ownership means for us, especially as an African-American people here in the U.S. And this, I would say this passion of mine is creating opportunities for other innovators to innovate. And other folks like you and I like to find their path and know that they can do these things. And I think that is the ongoing legacy of Black Innovation Lab, is doing that. You know, despite how many companies individually we help, all the people that will see that it's possible and that we've been innovating all along. And now we are doing this in the technology industry as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm curious, like, I don't know if you have numbers up top of your head, but if you have stories of folks who went through Black Girls Code or you've been associated with since then, like any sort of impact stories that you could share with people who've been impacted through your work?
Think, you know, there's so many. Like, I think when we were talking to, like, my daughter graduated, she stuck with computer science. She's at Microsoft. I have students that are in the gaming industry. I have folks that are working for folks like Apple, folks that are working for, like, smaller startup companies, and, you know, many of the girls that have become leaders that are just doing things in their own communities, either at their schools and their universities, even if it's like social justice movements, they're doing that. Because I think part of what we saw as part of Black Girls Code is that, we were teaching coding skills, but they also were becoming very strong leaders. And I think that is the most important thing, because whether they go into, you know, we have folks that are at pre-med. So like whether they go into medicine, whether they go into technology, whether they become an entrepreneur, is them knowing that they can be a leader and that they can find their voices, is the enduring benefit of being a part of our program, way beyond, you know, learning code or Java.
I'm going to say 100% again, because I agree with you on that. And I think that the one thing that got me to build the app that I built in 17 weeks was because open source. And it's because when I was Googling, I was finding solutions and I was finding curriculum and documentation to say, oh, run this script on your computer. If this breaks, here's the answer on Stack Overflow. And I never had that. Like when I was tinkering with code, I would always ask friends. I didn't have a lot of friends that didn't do this, but or we would just go in like weird dark corners of the internet and ask questions on how to like break or hack things. And so like knowledgeable that way. But then when I sort of came up for air after school and after having a kid, I was like, oh, wow. Like there's I didn't know what Stack Overflow was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wow. People are just giving answers away for free.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to pay for this.
Right. And so open source, I think, is so important even in the history of Black Girls Code, is because when we first started, like I had a minor in computer science, but I hadn't been coding. Like I was a traditional electrical engineer. And so when I was pulling together this core team to help us like create the very first curriculum for that pilot program, how we did it is because Scratch, EDU, they open sourced all this curriculum. And so we found it on the web and was like, oh my God, like this is curriculum. And we took that curriculum and that's what we taught the very first class with. And so for me, that's why when you were telling me when I came in that you were doing this work in open source, like that's like a special place in my heart, because there would be no Black Girls Code if there wasn't for open source. We would never have been able to start. I could not have done the curriculum. So it is important that we really have creators that look like us to keep that movement going.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I believe that too, because now we have like organizations, like basically what I'm getting at is like everyone doesn't have to start from zero. You just said this.
Yeah.
And like we just got the Techstars just recently.
Yeah.
And starting it, we got $100,000 in AWS credits, and credits in DigitalOcean, and credits in this, and credits in that. And I did a tweet this week actually, and I was like, oh wow, it's amazing what AWS credits does to you. Like you swing for the fences. You have so much confidence when you walk in the room. Love it. Yeah. When you're like, oh, I can try a bunch of stuff and not have to worry how much it costs.
Right.
And that's what these programs and these sort of institutions and like these open source projects do for folks. It gives you the confidence to be like, oh, they already solved that problem. Let me just solve a harder problem. Yeah. Like a step above.
Yeah.
And And I was going to mention Hack the Hood. Hack the Hood is something
Hack the Hood.
Yeah.
So we all grew up in the same like Oakland ecosystem of like change makers. There was Black Girls Code, Hack the Hood, Hidden Genius Project. Yes. And I feel like I'm missing. The game heads. Okay. So like all of us like kind of started around the same time, and a lot of us were really like social change agents, and like we just like technology as well. And so seeing the progress of organizations like Hack the Hood, Hidden Genius Project just bought a whole building.
Oh, where's your building?
It's on Franklin Street in Oakland.
Oh, nice.
They bought a whole building, and now there's multiple organizations in that building.
I'm shocked because I remember visiting them at this small thing off Telegraph.
Yeah, they bought a whole building, and now there's like a Best Buy lab and coding lab and hackerspace in it and several other nonprofits. And so over the 10 years, like seeing all those grassroots organizations really grow and thrive, it's like been so inspirational to see that happening in Oakland, not in San Francisco, in the heart of Oakland. I think that kind of speaks to, like why we're this pin, because I think that history of activism is something that we carry with us as innovators in the future.
Yeah. Folks like getting together in Oakland. Yeah. Like I love like MLK Day. I love like the Juneteenth party that they've been doing the past couple of years as well. Yeah. Yeah. I see all the people I know, even from people from tech, people I don't know from tech, people I know from church. Like they all come through, even if they moved out to the, to the boonies in like Antioch or whatever, Pittsburgh. But they come through and it's like, it is like a family reunion. I've only been here almost 10 years. But I feel like
it's a special place. And I have, like I said, I've only been here 2 years, but I've been like a part of the community, like working, and my daughter going to school in Oakland for 10 plus years. And so for me, just to be able to build a business in Oakland has been like really special for me.
Okay. So you got Memphis is the focus now, but like what's next after Memphis?
Well, I really wanted to get Memphis to do more than just be the first location of Black Innovation Lab. As I was saying when we were chatting, I really want to see us be able to grow the tech ecosystem in Memphis and create a new pathway for opportunity within the city. Like it's been primarily about working at, FedEx, the hub there, or maybe Nike distribution center, because it's a distribution hub. But I think there's a real opportunity to make Memphis a hub for technology and innovation in the South. But then I would like to go some other places. So I definitely see places like New Orleans being on our list, somewhere in Mississippi, somewhere in maybe Birmingham, Alabama, where there's lots of talent, but not a lot of opportunity to get into the technology industry.
Okay, yeah. I have, our lead of engineer at OpenSauce is based in Huntsville.
Alabama.
So they do have the colleges out there and everything like that. And but yeah, it's I don't even think of Huntsville as a place to go, but I'm super happy to have Brandon on the team hanging out with us.
But that's why I think there's an opportunity there, because we often don't think of tech and innovation happening unless you look at East Coast, West Coast.
Yeah.
But we know that that's not the only place you can find talented people. And so being able to move the focus in some of these other places, even Midwest, with some of the things that are happening out there, is I think where the next great innovation is going to emerge from.
Excellent. Well, I'm here for it, because I think there is a shift that people are moving off the coast into the cheaper cities, if you want to call them that. And there's a lot of incentive to like take it back home or to go to a city in the middle of America,
right?
Because there's a lot of space there.
There's a lot of space. There's a lot of community. There's a lot of culture. There's a lot of history, and I think those are places that make for creating safety, right? Psychological safety, in a way that sometimes being in these places that are more considered tech hubs do not. And so if we can create opportunities where people don't have to leave Memphis to be successful, I think that's a great pathway to be on.
Excellent. Well, I don't want to end the path here, but I think we can wind down.
All right.
And appreciate you coming over, talking about your history, what you're working on next.
Yeah.
And looking forward to, staying saucy with you. And
all right.
Hopefully we can embed some of that secret sauce into the Black innovation.
I love that. Thank you for having me. And I'm so pleased to meet you and look forward to all your continued success as well.
All right. Yeah. And listeners, stay saucy.